No one's going to get permission to live the life that you want to lead. You have to do it yourself, no matter how either great your partner is or not great your partner is. It has to be an act of self-love and self-prioritization.
Welcome to Taking Care of Lady Business, where we have conversations about power, value, and success on your own terms. I'm talking with women who are building influence, wealth, and authority, not by following someone else's playbook, but by deciding what success looks like for themselves. These are candid conversations, hard-earned perspectives, and no BS insight from women who aren't asking permission. They're setting the standard. I'm your host, Jennifer Justice. Most people call me JJ. Let's get into it. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Taking Care of Lady Business. I'm Jennifer Justice. Today, we have Kerry Docherty. She is the co-founder of the Faherty brand, the clothing line I'm sure you've all seen on every corner that keeps popping up, and everybody is wearing it. So a big kudos to that. We'll talk a little bit about that. But also, she just released a book, and it's called Selfish. And we can't wait to get into that. Hi, Kerry. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. Happy to be here.
Good. I'm glad too. This is such an amazing, I wouldn't say a topic. It's like a theme, a life goal. I mean, everything to say that you are selfish as a woman.
Yes.
Right. And I'm sure that has so many other meanings than the dictionary definition of selfish, right? And I know you use the word self and what self is, right? I want to get into all that, but what I first want to do is kind of take us back to where you started, to where you thought that you had to write this book. So let's give us a little bit of synopsis of where Kerry is from.
Yes, middle child, happy-go-lucky, obedient, people-pleasing daughter, and spent most of the first half of my life putting other people's needs before my own. And at some point, it just stopped working for me. And I had always been an avid writer. In 2020, I joined a writing collective, and I remember being around a group of women, and I could not believe how honest they were about their life. And I thought, what would happen if I just sat down and really told the truth about my needs, my desires, the woman I want to be? What would unfold? And from that class emerged this body of work called Selfish. It was originally going to be called The Selfish Wife, but kind of as like a subversive trad wife distinction. But this book is so much beyond any identity. It's not just about being a wife. It's not just about being a mother. It's not just about being a founder. It's about what does it mean to be fully human and to put our own self and needs first.
Right. Oxygen mask on first in order to help others, right? I'm sure like every woman or, girl into womanhood that is on a plane that hears that, I think the first time is always like, wait, what? Isn't our instinct to do it to somebody else, You say like you grew up people pleasing, etc. Do you think that was a learned behavior or something that you just had in you?
Probably both, but I think mainly learned. There's just something that psychologically happens with women from a very young age. Our appearances are commented on, how much we smile, how kind we are. It's the water that we swim in that sometimes we don't even realize that it's shape-shifting us into someone that we might not truly be at our core.
Right. But in the meantime, like you're going through school, you're doing really well. You play lacrosse.
Yeah, get into Yale, like boom, boom,
Yale, and play lacrosse there, right? Like you had to have something. You couldn't be pleasing to everybody to do that, right? You had to be able to do that yourself in some way.
For the first half of my life, I thought I was a competitive, high-achieving type A woman. And I'm a Gemini. So half of me may be like that. I went to law school. Half of me may be like that. But the other half of me is an artist, is bohemian, is lazy, is carefree. And that part of me, that whole part of me was really neglected for the first half of my life. Now, I probably then pendulum swing too far to that side. But I've always felt like a little bit like my life was on a split screen and there were two of me and trying to figure out in any given moment who I was going to be, this or that.
I mean, it's probably a common, thought process and trajectory, right? But like, if you hadn't done those things, lacrosse and Yale, what opportunities would you have had, differently, right?
Right, right.
So when you think about that, like, is there some kind of survival method in there? Is there something that was like driving you in a different way?
There is a part of me that whatever I'm doing, I want to be the best at it. And not necessarily from an accolades perspective, although certainly that feels great. I was never competitive against other people, but there is something like if I'm going to be the best at this, I want to be the best. Even writing this book, if I'm going to write a book, I want it to be the best book that I can possibly write. So I have a high expectation of myself.
Yeah. And was there ever any part that you felt that you didn't deserve to write the book or to go to Yale or lacrosse? Was there any of those kinds of doubts?
When it came to writing the book, in terms of did I deserve it, I felt so moved and passionate about storytelling and truth telling. And I wanted to write a book about what it was like to be me. And I wanted to do it as honestly as possible because I had read so many books on entrepreneurship and motherhood and marriage. And I just felt like people were not telling the truth. Like they weren't really going there into their shadow side and about what was driving them, what their needs are, where was their messiness, where was their rage. And I wanted to do that.
Well, I mean, that's the messy side. No, we're the Instagram, people now, right?
Yep.
I mean, and that is, so commendable to do it, right? Because I mean, many times if you talk about it like a memoir, people are like, well, you have to be famous to write a memoir. So what was that process like in getting a book deal and trying to sell it and saying, no, I really do have something to say. People might only know me through the brand, but like there's other parts.
So in 2022, I had a kids book that came out, and that came around pretty organically. Years ago, I had taught mindfulness to children. And so the opportunity to write a kids book came to fruition. While I was on tour, I met a woman who was a friend of a friend, and I found out she was a literary agent. And I unabashedly said, I have some adult work. Can I send it to you? She said, sure. I didn't do a proper query, but I sent her 40 pages of essays. She didn't respond for 6 months. I was like, well, I blew that. Definitely blew that.
Did you like follow up and stuff?
Of course. She was like, sorry, I haven't gotten to it. She came back around 6 months later and said, okay, I think there could be something here. Start working on a proposal. So I started working on the proposal. She ended up signing me. And then I sent it out to publishers. I had 3 interviews and Penguin gave me an offer. And I will say, though, the 3 different interviews I had with the publishers, the 2 other ones kept being like, so how will Faherty brand sell this book? How are they going to market it? Is it going to be in the stores? And I remember thinking, oh God, I don't know if Faherty's going to promote this book. Like, this is such an honest personal story. The 3rd publisher who signed me said, Kerry, I don't care about Faherty brand. My question to you is, are you willing to blow up your life? And I said, I'm willing to blow up my life. And she gave me the offer the next day.
I mean, if that's not an ad for the book. Release this book and blow up your life.
Yeah. I think I was naive, though, what some of the consequences would be.
Right. Let's hold the consequences till later, keep the audience in suspense. But, let's go back a little bit on that because I mean, I do love that, like you found these 3 people to do it in the memoir because you're just told, like, you just get such a negative feedback and all of like stuff and writing books, etc. So,
I know.
Okay, let's put a pin in how you blew up your life and the consequences. So let's go back a little bit when you're your type A self, because you didn't just stop at Yale, you ended up going to law school.
Yes.
And you and Alex were not together, who is your husband and one of the founders of the brand. And you guys weren't together. You still ended up going to law school. Why did you think you needed to go to law school?
I was always fascinated by the law and justice. And I was fascinated by how people heal when they don't have access to justice. So I was really interested in social justice, human rights, transitional justice. when I went to law school, that was my main priority. Like I clerked at the ACLU, did a lot of human rights work and travel. I really thought I was going to go in that direction. And then I clerked for a federal judge for 2 years, which I loved. At the same time, I started a deep mindfulness practice. And I did it selfishly because I had a lot of stress and I didn't want to feel constantly stressed. And as I started practicing mindfulness, I also started teaching it just for fun to kids, to other lawyers, to friends. And by the time my clerkship ended, I had fallen into this mindfulness coaching business. So I did that for 2 years. Alex and I got married. 2 weeks later, we moved in with his identical twin brother. And then 3 months later, Faherty started. And that was how I ended up in fashion and clothing.
Oh, I know. What I'm trying to get at is seeing this like transition, right? You started transitioning from this like, I just am going by the rules. I'm doing everything right. I get into Yale. Lacrosse and, all of these like tracks. And then like, while in law school, you notice your stress, get into mindfulness. And then your brain is there for your law degree, but it just switches and you start working with a brand instead, right? And like, what were you doing for it? When you started the brand, like what was your position? Was it as general counsel?
I mean, if you can say there's a general counsel when you have 5 people starting a brand, living together, living in the back office, barely able to pay anyone a salary. I mean, we were doing everything. We didn't have enough people. I was the fit model, the social media coordinator, the PR, the head of HR. Alex was business, finance, operations. Mike was creative design, marketing. We all had to wear so many different hats just to get the business up and running.
Right. But at the same time, like, did you really want to do it when you think back?
Good question. I loved being a part of something that I thought was fast moving. I loved how intellectually hard it was. It felt like I was in business school, except instead of a case study, we were bringing to life a real brand. And Alex and I had just gotten married. And so I remember thinking, wow, if I don't join this brand, I'm literally never going to see him. I know I have skills that can help. I was young and had a lot of energy, and it was like, let's do it. This is what's on my plate. Let's do it.
So you did it. And you opened the book, right? With you two sitting on a therapist's couch and talking about your salary.
Yes.
So talk a little bit about that.
So the book opens with, yep, Alex and I in couples therapy, and we are there for one reason only, to figure out how much I should make. And, Alex is a feminist at heart. We've known each other since the first day of college. And also he was adamant that he should make more than me because this brand was he and his brother's dream since they were kids. He was the quote unquote CEO. He bore most of the financial stress on him. And I, in his words, just did what I want. And I remember asking him, well, why don't you do what you want?
Right.
And him saying, because I'm not selfish.
Wasn't he doing what he wants?
He was, but he also felt, I think, a lot of obligation and duty at a young age to really financially provide for his family. And I think he felt very lonely in that stress. And so I think he saw me having a lot more flexibility, not as committed to the success of the brand. I slept 10 hours every night. I felt great. And he was up every night being like, how am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to make sure this brand makes it? I honestly didn't feel the same amount of financial stress as he did. If the brand didn't work out, I would just go back to doing something else. Whereas this brand was such a part of he and his brother's identity. I mean, their last name is stitched onto every garment. It's a huge part of their identity.
What made you think that you should have the same amount of salary? Because that's not a very typical thing. Women, typically don't ask for, and I coach women all day long, right? About, asking for more and getting what you're worth. But what made you so adamant about it that you ended up in a couples therapist's office?
Because I know how valuable I am. And I know the gifts that I bring to this brand and have brought to this brand. And some of them are not as seen. Some of them are the softer skills, the visionary skills, not just around design, but what's our legacy? How do we treat people? How does our our team feel when they work together? How do our customers feel? Inclusivity, community, culture, those are all things that I'm really passionate about. And I think a lot of times the hungry beast of capitalism, if it doesn't inherently have a line item in terms of how it's like
Yeah. If it doesn't have
creating
an
profit,
ROI. Yeah.
correct. And I know what my ROI is, and it matters, and human value matters.
Yes. I mean, everything is like got to be tied to a dollar amount, right? But obviously, like Alex saw that, right? And knew that, but at the same time, still didn't want to pay you the same amount of money.
But spoiler alert, we ended up making the same amount. So he came around. He came around.
I love it. And then at one point, you're working, and then I see like, you go out to California, you see your sister, ended up in like a retreat, other time you're out there and you decide to stay out longer because there's a guy you have a connection with that, helps you with your creativity. Obviously you're being pulled away, right? And is there one particular time that you just went like, wait a minute, what am I doing? Like, I'm going down this path. Is it gradual? Is it quick turnaround like that? You were like, there's something more to me.
Gradual and also very disruptive. And you kind of touched on it, but at the height of starting the brand, I'm feeling burned out. I'm feeling disconnected from my husband because all we do is work. I'm feeling enmeshed in his family dynamics. I don't feel individuated in myself. I feel very much like I'm a part of this huge up and coming family business clothing brand. We have a trailer tour selling clothes while we're on tour. We're at Coachella and one of our favorite bands is playing, and we meet the band, and I form this like deep connection and friendship with the lead singer. And as the book chronicles, it leads to like a relationship that definitely crosses the line in my marriage. And also, what he represents to me is this unawakened creativity in myself. Like, I am now close to this artist who is taking and alchemizing pain and turning it into something beautiful. And I'm like, I want to do that. I want to be an artist. I didn't realize that at the time, but reflecting back, like that's what I was so drawn to, was that unbridled creativity that I had shut down on myself.
And did you have that as a child? Were you creative as a kid where you do art and stuff and just kind of like push it down because you couldn't make money that way? Or it's.
I think I was an avid journaler. I loved poetry. At a young age, I was always writing poetry. I just didn't have the imagination that that could be a career. I didn't have the imagination that I could actually be brave enough to have it out in the world so unabashedly. I used to have a blog, so I would do a little bit of that. I mean, I think I always hoped that one day I would write a book. I just didn't know if it would ever come to fruition.
Because you didn't believe in yourself enough to think that, or you just didn't know you'd push yourself enough to do it?
Didn't know if I could push myself what to do, and I didn't know what I would write about. I would sometimes write poetry, put poetry on Instagram, but I didn't know what my story was. Like, what am I trying to say?
Even though you had your mindfulness practice, like, did that kind of go away a little bit when you were starting the company, or?
I really wove it into the company. So I would teach mindfulness to our team members. I think this idea of presence and conscious leadership was always at the top of my mind. I do think skill sets learned are never a waste. Whether or not you're a lawyer and then you're not, officially practicing, it's never a waste. It shapes your psyche in a way that can be an offering down the line.
Right. But in the meantime, even though you're a lawyer, you have all these business people that I'm sure you have connections with, right? Wasn't there a time you went to a psychic on the other Upper West Side instead of like figuring out from like a practical way? You decided to go like the more woo-woo route to figure out.
I love the woo-woo. Yes. I mean, I love therapy. I love all the things. But there is something about a psychic that feels a little bit like a shortcut sometimes. Things are happening on different planes energetically, whether we believe them or not. And I love just getting a slightly different eagle-eyed perspective on what could be happening beyond just what I'm so stuck in and spiraling in my mind about.
And through this all, right, you're talking about your burnout and like, you're totally depleted. And why didn't you just walk away? You find this other side of yourself.
I thought about it. I really thought about it. There was so much beauty that was still unfolding. And I think with Alex and I really believe in us as a couple, even though we were going through a really hard time. I knew that there was more that could be excavated, but there were certainly times when I was scared and being like, I don't know if we're going to make it. I can't stay in this ecosystem without completely drowning.
Yeah, I mean, because ultimately this is another person's dream, right? So for you to be able to go all in with somebody else's vision, but still maintain yourself, how did you do that?
I couldn't do it. That's why I really lost myself in a lot of ways. That's why I had an emotional affair. That's why I found myself individuating and separating myself and pursuing my own creative needs. I think if I would have stayed exactly as it would, when life isn't working, it'll continue to reveal itself to you and it'll only get harder. And a lot of times we don't evolve or shift unless we have to. And I think I got to the point where I was like, my life has to be different than what this is. And I don't know exactly what it's going to look like. But first, I joined a writing collective. That was the first step. Then there was the kids' book. Then there was me writing the adults' book. It's like we just have to see the next right step in order to forge these new paths.
And do you think a lot of this has to do with you being a woman or a human?
I think a human, and also I think women have a harder time prioritizing their own needs, particularly when we're in relationships, when we're in careers, when we're mothers. There's a built in expectation that highly commendable woman will be quote unquote selfless. In obituaries, when we talk about how amazing women are, a lot of times we use the word selfless, which is to say, they are not prioritizing themselves. They're putting less of themselves at the front of their life, and they're putting everyone else's. And that can be a beautiful thing, and also it can come at a cost.
Yeah, yeah. We're going to get to that cost in a minute. But, your book opens like when you're born with a vagina, chipping away begins, right?
Yes.
So what do you say more about that? What do you mean by that?
If you think of all of us entering life as these little balls of clay, not sure what we're going to sculpt into, and then society just slowly starts to make you smaller. The way you're supposed to look, the way you're supposed to act, the expectations. It's so easy to, at some point, look down at yourself that was this whole ball of clay and think, I don't recognize the shape I'm in anymore.
And if you had to go back and do it again, when do you think is the key pivotal moment that you began to like lose your power of yourself over yourself? If that's how you felt. I don't want to put those words in your mouth.
No, I think it was a slow chipping away. I can't even name the exact moment. And I think that's erosion. It's the waves that wash ashore that slowly chip away at us. And I think that's what can be scary. But the gift is at any minute we can wake up and say, oh, I'm not going to erode anymore. Like now I can choose me.
Yeah. But oftentimes, people are so deep into certain situations. It's whether it's their lifestyle, right? That they don't want to give up and realize it's like, oh, wait, I've been working my ass off too. But if I get rid of this, like that's not my lifestyle anymore because we don't get paid enough. Or now I have these kids and I'm divorced, I'm by myself, and like there's nothing, what am I gonna do? Right. And I still want to be the best mom. Or, you're just in a job that has the golden handcuffs on you. And to be able to then turn that is not an easy ship to turn around. So what was the discovery? You wrote this book. Like, tell me what this discovery is, because I'm sure you started going, what? Like you say, it had a ton of tolls on your marriage. You realize you were doing things, you realize he's doing things, you're realizing you're making choices that don't work, you know what I mean? And like losing that power over yourself. It's a big question. Sorry.
No, I mean, it's the question. And this book is not a self-help book, right? When you read this book, this is not a how-to, I became a selfless woman to a selfish woman. This is a messy and complicated journey of navigating dynamics in people and conflicting needs and the consequences of it. And it's not about right or wrong. Like you were saying, we find ourselves in these situations. Like if I do this and I have to give this up. For me, none of it's right or wrong. are these choices making us feel more alive, or are these choices depleting us? And for me, writing this book was so nourishing to me. It reawakened a part of myself that lay dormant. It infused passion back into me. I fell in love with my creative voice. I felt like I came alive again. And even though there have been significant consequences, they were worth it to me.
Yeah. Let's talk about the consequences, but let's first talk about what you won.
Yeah, I won unbridled truth telling. I won creative freedom. I won a form of like self liberation. And I think when we are selfish and our cup is full, we really overflow and can nourish people around us. And I think my kids are happier than they've ever been. And ironically, and if Alex was on this podcast with me, he would say the same. This book could have broken our marriage, but it's also the best we've been. And I didn't write this book to test our marriage. I hoped that it could expand where we were in such a way that it deepened us. And it has done that. And also, it could have gone the other way. A lot of people who write books like this are no longer married.
Yeah, no, of course. The reason why I asked you the question of what you won first versus like what you're going to get into, like everything that happened in the meantime, is because I want people to not be scared. You know what I mean? And it's like, if you just hear the bad, you're like, oh, I can't do that, right? Because it can be scary. But the one thing you cannot, like as women, we cannot be afraid to come into our full power and who we are out of fear. Because that is what you will regret when you're 80 years old. That's a massive fucking regret. But trying and failing, that is not a regret, right? So let's get into it. You said you had a big thing. You're like, I didn't know what it was going to cost. So let's get into that.
I really thought, I'm going to write a story about what it's like to be me, and I'm just going to be honest. And every day I woke up and I would look at my screen and I say, what am I not saying that needs to be said? And I would write it down. And when it came time to finishing the book, I really thought I would be met with a standing ovation from people I loved, being like, good job. How brave. And some people reacted like that. And some people didn't. And some people were angry at me. Some people felt betrayed. Listen, the self is not an individual. Prentice Hempel states that. I am who I am because of the people around me. And I feel like there needs to be a support network of people who write memoirs. And there needs to be a support network for people who are in memoirs that do not want to be in memoirs. And some people felt implicated in the book. And I get that.
Well, didn't they have to approve ultimately, or?
Yes, they did. The question for a memoirist from a legal perspective, which you will appreciate, is not, do you like it, but is it true? And that's a distinction. And there are some things in the book that people do not like. It may be true. They don't necessarily have the autonomy to change that. Although I certainly made edits based on some people's requests.
And how long was this process of just pure torture?
Um, well, I gave it to Alex last January, and that was the hardest for him to read because, again, I chronicle a years long relationship with a man outside of my marriage.
Did he know at the time?
He knew for most of it. And there's an incident in the book where he reads a piece I wrote in Brooklyn Writers Collective about this character, and it broke his heart. I just think he couldn't believe I was memorializing the hardest part of our life into something public facing that our employees would read, our customers could read. It was so devastating to him. The last chapter is him reading the draft and his response. And he's still so proud of me. And also there are parts of this book that makes him ill.
Yeah. And you have kids, right?
Yes.
And they're younger, but they're going to get older. And I'm sure people talk. So what do you think that you want them to learn from it?
It's interesting. My kids are 8 and 10, so they know enough about what's unfolded. And I remember Ava, my daughter, saying to me, because I remember asking her, parts of our life are going to be out in the world. How does that make you feel? And she said, very matter-of-factly, your book, your choice. And so I think she understood that this was my decision and I would take responsibility for it. My son asked me, Mom, are there any secrets in the book? He's 8, Pisces, deep feeler. And I said, Riggs, I grew up in a family that has a lot of secrets, but our family doesn't have secrets. And so, no, there are no secrets in this book.
Yeah. You talk a lot about that in a chapter, your dad having cancer and you guys didn't know, et cetera. Like, do you feel like that was like a liberation, you coming out with this? Is just like, it's like your child, like so much of what we are and who we are is our childhood, right? And the generations before, we don't even understand the trauma that we're holding. I'm from a single teenage welfare mom. My mom didn't graduate high school. I'm first generation, of course. So I had all those same instincts. I got to go to school. I got to do this. I have to have a job that makes me have money so I can be independent. I'm never getting married because I don't want to have to make compromises because all I see is women in my life making not compromises, sacrificing their entire life. Right. And I made a very conscious choice. And then as my life went on, I started going, well, am I doing this out of fear? I'm like, no, I really know that when I'm with somebody else, I am a really good executor and I'll start executing their life instead of executing mine. And that would take so much for me to change that behavior. Right. And now we have kids and we want to change that. So with you, it's like, and telling them, it's like, we don't have secrets anymore. Like what an unveiling when you wrote that book, did you really realize,
Yeah. And I think the kids see it. What do they say? It's not what you tell your kids, it's how you are with your kids. And I think they have seen me put myself first and spend hours and hours working on something that is so important to me. And I'm so proud of that. And yeah, they're going to be in therapy in 5 years. Of course they are. I'm sure there are other things I have done, but I'm proud that they see a prioritization of creativity and autonomy.
And power over yourself. You're the only one that can control your destiny, and your choices really matter. You can choose to stay in your safe spot, right? It doesn't make you happy. It doesn't make you fulfilling, but it's like literally makes you feel safe because there's nothing that can hurt you, right?
Yes.
And like putting this out must have felt extremely powerful as well, regardless of how disappointed people were.
Actually, it is such a proclamation of love, of like self love, that I matter enough. I love myself enough to know that it's okay to tell a story about what it's like to be me, to feel like it will be an offering, particularly to other women.
So, in doing that though, like, what would you say to women who don't feel like they have support in wanting to find their true self, find their power?
No one's going to get permission to live the life that you want to lead. You have to do it yourself, no matter how either great your partner is or not great your partner is. It has to be an act of self-love and self-prioritization.
Right. And that's the strategy, right? And like, a lot of women think it has to do with confidence. And so I'm glad you answered it that way, because that's exactly what I wanted to hear. 'Cause, you can get into this pattern of like, well, she had a husband and he could support her and she could do these things. Yes. But then, you can also read Belle Burden's book and Strangers, and you can be like, you know what? You could give everything away to somebody. And, while people are saying, I'm not crying for her because she had she had this money and she had this clout and she had this status. And it's like, it can happen to anybody. And that does not mean that the grief is not there. The fear is not there. The inability to move forward, or the strength, you could go either way. Right. And I think that story was equally a story to yours of a true self-love in a way. And we don't really talk about like self-help and self-love and all that stuff. And here we use it as framing as like a power over yourself. This, you are the most important person. And unless you have your oxygen mask on first, you can help no one else. And what you have to offer and what you have to give is unique to everyone, right? And so having seen that through your eyes and saying it as a way of being selfish in something that's just so naughty as a woman, you know what I mean? It's your obituary is going to be, she was selfish.
Yes, I hope that's on my gravestone. I hope it's on my gravestone.
We love her for it. Amazing. So look, we got to get going here, unfortunately, but Tell me, we have one question we ask everybody on this, and it is, what is the worst advice you've ever received?
It's interesting. I feel like this past year I got a lot of advice telling me not to move forward with the book. And I'm so glad I didn't listen to it.
I mean, that's the through line of every woman's worst advice, which is why I ask them. It's not to be their true self. It's to play it safe. It's to put your head down and work, not rock the boat, make everybody feel, fine, people pleasing. It's all these themes. And whenever we step out of that zone, people are like, I don't know what to do with you.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on and talking about this. I mean, we could have done your entrepreneurial journey, but I'm sure everybody does. But I think that this is so important in particular, not just be like, you got to do this or you got to do that. It's like, this is my story. Tell everyone where they can find the book, where they can find you.
You can find me on Instagram at Kerry Docherty or my website, kerrydocherty.co. And then you can find the book really anywhere, bookshops.org, Amazon, Target, independent bookstore.
Anything you want to say about the Faherty brand, like anything that's happening, going on, etc. Might as well plug it at the end.
Oh, I know. I just love it so much. We're 13 years in. It's a family-run business. We really care. We care about quality and sustainability and creating beautiful, high-quality clothes. And we're doing it.
How many stores do you have now?
Almost 90.
What?
I know. Our first international store just opened up in Biarritz, France. So we're doing it. We're doing it.
That is insane. Wow, you really are doing it. And it like came full circle. Alex is also a Poly Prep alum, like my kids.
He
right?
is. He
yes.
is.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for coming on to this episode of Taking Care of Lady Business. Thank you for everyone listening. Until next time, I'm Jennifer Justice. Thanks to MedJet for supporting the Taking Care of Lady Business podcast. When you travel for work or internationally, the real question isn't if something could happen, it's whether you've planned for it. That's why I'm a member of MedJet and have been for years. If your security is threatened or you're hospitalized while traveling, MedJet can get you home and to the hospital you choose, not just the closest one. It's not travel insurance. It's about not leaving critical decisions to chance. If you travel regularly, it's worth having in place. You can learn more at medjet.com. Thanks for tuning in to Taking Care of Lady Business. If this was useful, subscribe and share with a friend. Make sure to check out the show notes for more on my guest and me, Jennifer Justice. Taking Care of Lady Business is a production of Lady Business LLC. See you next time.